This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in association with KWS, a trusted partner for farmers for generations.
Rugby almost came second to me in when I was growing up. Like I went and played at the weekends and Sundays and at school and stuff like that. But my true love was always farming. I was constantly on the farm, wanting to be driving a tractor, wanting to be help do this. We had ewes in those days. We had a dairy herd as well. So I constantly wanted to be in the whole environment of it.
As the British Lions prepare to take on the Wallabies, we speak to the former rugby international who says farming was always his first love. We've got the latest on the Welsh Sustainable Farming Scheme, and we catch up with the catchy harvest. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh. Broom.
All that and more coming up later. But first, the government launched the next phase of its national food strategy this week, saying it wanted people to eat less junk food and start the good food cycle. So what does it mean for farmers? I caught up with Anna Taylor from the Food Foundation, one of the people who's been working with the government on food, and I asked her what it was all about. Anna, this announcement we've had from the government on the next stages for the food strategy, I guess it's fair to say that the food system in the UK doesn't really work for farmers, it doesn't really work for consumers. Certainly, as far as the government is concerned, it's not working for them either.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think we're seeing now such a huge impact of diet-related disease on, our everyday life, if you like, but also, of course, the impact on the NHS where the demand is soaring. And that immediately, of course, impacts on the national budget and the extent to which we can really afford that problem to continue. And I think today's food strategy announcement really is setting an ambition to it's talking about really turning off the junk food cycle, this sort of connection between our evolved appetites and the fact that it's easier to make money from selling food, which is not very good for us, and turning that on its head and turning it into a good food cycle. That's the sort of at the heart of what the government set out today. I think it's a very exciting and ambitious central proposition. But the extent to which we can achieve it entirely rests on whether or not it's going to be followed with some really meaningful policy commitments. We've had some good ones in the last couple of months, but we need a lot more to make that good food cycle really kick in.
You've been speaking here at the Farmers Club today. You've had a good reception. At least one of the questions was, the government is not doing the best that it can for us as farmers, but how do we get things back on track?
Well, I mean, I think there's a real opportunity under this food strategy to set out an agenda for national nutrition security and for that to have a really clear role for British farmers, particularly around fruit and veg. We've got, 5% of our children are eating their 5 a day. We've got and that's flowing through directly into some of these poor health outcomes that we're seeing in childhood and then in later life. And we're importing a lot of our fruit and veg. So we need to grow the market here in the UK. We need to drive up demand as well as support farmers to be producing more. And also claim more of that market share for British producers. I see a huge opportunity. We've got a big untapped opportunity with public procurement, all of that food purchasing, which is government is doing to really drive that British supply chain. And I think fruit, veg and pulses and beans are really where you can tick all of these boxes: environment, health, economy, growth, farming, the whole lot all together. It feels to me like it's an area that the food strategy should really pay a lot of attention to, a coordinated set of actions to deliver that growth that we need.
And food poverty, of course, being a huge, huge issue. But what you're saying is that making food more affordable to consumers doesn't necessarily mean lower prices for farmers.
No, I mean, food poverty is, we've got two problems. We've got one, the low income problem, which is not a price problem, that's an affordability problem. And there are ways in which the government needs to think about that problem. Free school meals helps a bit, relieve some of those family pressures. So that's really great that the government's committed to that. But there's more to be done. Our data shows that about 14% of households are food insecure at the moment. But there's a second problem, which is if you've got very little money, the environments around you tend to act against you buying healthier products. That might be because those options are just not available in your high street, or it might be simply the price factor, and that the cheapest way to fill up bellies is buying very cheap, calorie-dense foods which don't have a lot of nutrients in them. So we've got to change that balance of prices so that the healthier versions become more affordable and within reach in comparison to the others, as well as putting more money in people's pockets. But we can do this, right? We're spending a lot of money in the NHS mopping up this problem. If some of that resource were actually spent preventing it, we deliver much better bang for buck. So putting money in people's pockets to buy fruit and vegetables through voucher schemes like the Healthy Start scheme, through social prescribing, lots of ways in which we can do that and pay a fair price for farmers. That's got to be locked into all of this, because we can't have a situation where farmers are growing fruit and veg and not able to make a livelihood.
Anna Taylor from the Food Foundation on the Good Food Cycle. Thank you very much. Louise, another step from the government on the way to having a complete food strategy.
Yes, that's good news, isn't it? Because I think we've been wanting and needing a food strategy for a while. It's interesting just reading through the government's summary on it. It does recognise that we will require a more joined up approach. And I think that's something that we have talked about before on the podcast. They've set a lot of hairs running, haven't they, the government, what with the we can go on and on about this, but there's the land use framework, the farming roadmap, the farm profitability review, environmental improvement plans, all sorts. So all of these things presumably are going to feed into this food strategy or are going to be part of it. So I don't suppose we're going to see anything, materialise too quickly. And I think they have actually already put out their sort of 10 priority outcomes that they want from this. And this really, in a nutshell, is making good food accessible to everyone. So that's healthy, nutritious and sustainable food. Farmers have been involved in this strategy, which is good news, isn't it? I suppose the only other thing that really strikes me when reading through it is that it does imply that the consumer has been a bit of a loser in all this. Now, I'm not sure I really agree with that. I mean, if we forget about those, for example, on very low incomes for a moment, then actually the consumer now has a huge array of foodstuffs and ingredients at their disposal. And I think they are cheaper in real terms than they have been, in history, really. So the consumer's done okay, in my opinion. I do understand that there are challenges and stresses in the food system, and Anna Taylor talks about some of those in the audio. But I think we don't need to worry about the consumer too much. We just need to make sure that diets improve, especially amongst those on very low incomes.
I mentioned it in the podcast the other month. I went to a workshop about this, and much as what's come out on this latest position statement this week about this is sort of the stuff that was being talked about at the workshop thing that I went to. The government recognises that there's a lot of work to be done to transition the food system or the farming system. But then some of it's like, we've got to cut down the reliance on families relying on emergency food aid, food banks, whatever you want to call it. But the only way you're going to do that is either giving those people, either those people have to have an ability where they can earn more money to buy the food, or you make the food cheaper so they can afford it. And so then you're back into the cycle. So there's a lot of aspirational lines in here and a lot of really good stuff. The idea that you can make the food system more healthy, take out some of the ultra processed stuff, make our food supply chain more resilient, etc. It's all great, worthwhile stuff. But ultimately, it all costs money to produce. And I think what's really significant is that the minister talks about food security, and that's something that farming organisations across the board have been banging on about forever. And the government now actually acknowledges that, food security is national security, resilience, etc., etc. So that's really important. But then there's other areas that, to keep the food security there, you've got to support farmers through the transition to change how they produce stuff so they have less impact on the environment, etc., etc., etc. So it's all very laudable, isn't it? But it's actually the hard stuff is actually delivering it, because when it comes to consumers, they're just going to buy what tastes nice and is cheap. And if I don't know, what do? Do you take all the ultra processed off the shelf, and you force them down the vegetable route? Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you're going to actually change that whole consumer choice thing, because you could do all this, make all this wonderful food, and you develop this wonderful system, and yet they're still all going buy all the crap at the end of the aisle. I don't know. It's a really tricky one.
The other thing that struck me, Hugh, was not much mention of farmers. I mean, Daniel Zeichner, Minister for Food Security, as he's described in the press release, talking about wanting to help the amazing businesses that feed our nation to grow and thrive. Well, I would have thought that would be farmers in there somewhere, but he doesn't specifically say. He just talks about more jobs, stronger local economies, while making it easier for families to eat better and feel better.
Yeah, I mean, it does mention farmers a couple of times on the government. You find the piece on the .gov website about it. But you're right, he doesn't mention it in his quotes, and it's this whole food sector. There's an acknowledgement. So there's good things are the food security thing. That's a good acknowledgement. It talks about, levels of self-sufficiency in certain foodstuffs. We know that we could do better when it comes to fresh produce. But then anyone that's listening to this that produces fresh produce on a huge scale will tell you it's damn hard to do. And to do it, you need a plentiful supply of labour. You need, a marketplace that isn't too steeped in red tape, like all of us do to operate in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to make sure that there's a fair and level playing field for these businesses to thrive here if they are to become, to increase the amount that they can produce here versus what might be imported. You've got to move the lines, as you will, the rules of engagement around so that they can actually thrive and they can actually kick on. So look, if they do that, great. Tom Bradshaw makes his on the NFU line, and he's absolutely right in the coverage. He makes the reference to this about when they talk about the environment and water and air quality, and they talk about biodiversity. So there are legal, if you will, limits, frameworks, whatever, that govern that we need to improve water, air, and soil. There's legal things that talking about net zero and legal commitments there, and there are legal things talking about biodiversity and habitat. There is absolutely nothing legal talking, any legal limit regulation about this whole food security thing and this level of self-sufficiency. And if you're really serious about it, as the policy would lead us to believe that the government is, then surely you would put that into some sort of statute as well and say, yeah, we absolutely don't want to drop below X% self-sufficiency, and we need to see legal targets where these sectors come up to the mark, and there is framework and joined up governance across all departments, across the whole of the economy to make this work. And that sort of bit, there's a lot of talk here. There is a lot of warm, wonderful words about how we're going to save the world by growing our own vegetables, yada, 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 or some of our own vegetables that we don't grow. But actually doing it on the ground is really hard. And the other thing I will say again, this whole idea that, you've got to make this food, available for all. Well, it's about cost. And how do you do that? Do you either subsidise consumers or do you subsidise producers to make food cheaper? Because the market, you can't manipulate the market. And there seems to be this slightly divorced from reality, isn't it? That you can say all these wonderful things, but the market is the blooming market. And you against the world context, it's the market. So you've got to either subsidise the heck out of production to make it cheap, or you subsidise consumers. Well, I can't see the government has no appetite to really do either to the level to make it super cheap for everyone. So lots of warm words, some good things in there, but the proof is going to be in the pudding. And look, this is just a first outline of where they're going. We've got to see the detail coming further down the line. And to get that detail, everything has got to be joined up. And we know how good government can be at not joining stuff up.
And Louise, no surprise either, I guess, that they're looking at the impacts of climate change and nature.
Yeah, it does make mention of the impact that the food system has on both climate and on nature. It doesn't just pin the blame for that on farming, although there is some section in there about the amount of emissions that farming is responsible for. But actually, this is now talking about the whole food system. So I think we know in agriculture, in farming, we know what those challenges are. I would be less clear about what they are across the whole food system. But I think the whole point of this is that everybody has got to do their bit, haven't they? We do know some of the actions that can be done to improve the situation. So we've just got to keep going with those, I think.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Hi, it's Kate Cobbold, Head of Product Management and Agri-Service at KWS. Today I want to talk to you about a new way of thinking at KWS, Productivity Squared. Productivity Squared realises the potential of our varieties. We know that yield is king and directly linked to profitability, so ensuring you have the right variety that can maximise output is key. But Productivity Squared is much more than that. It's breeding varieties that have resilience, are competitive, and will sustainably meet the demands of farmers and downstream partners. So how do we do that? Well, Productivity Squared isn't just a slogan. It's a bold statement of intent to deliver not just incremental gains in our varieties, but quantum improvements in yield and efficiency to deliver long-term sustainability on farm. We're investing today in tomorrow's super varieties because the crops of the future need to do more than just grow well. They need to grow smarter. At its core, Productivity Squared is about ensuring the varieties you select meet the demands not just of today, but for tomorrow as well, combining genetic innovation with practical flexibility to help you stay ahead of changing climates, markets, and regulations. Tune in to the upcoming episodes of our Productivity Squared series, where we will take a closer look at some of our key varieties for drilling this autumn.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And Welsh farm leaders have expressed concern that the basic payment scheme in Wales is to be cut by 40% next year as the Welsh Government rolls out the new Sustainable Farming Scheme. Think about it as a sustainable farming incentive, but for Wales. Details of the scheme were released by Deputy First Minister Hugh Davis. I caught up with Aled Jones, President of NFU Cymru, and I put it to him that things weren't as bad as they could be.
There has been movement, without a doubt. And, we've reflected that in our statements. Quite considerable changes have been made and provisions as well to safeguard, there's less duplication. They've assimilated the 3 animal health universal actions into one. Makes sense. The tree planting has gone. The ponds and scrapes for each individual farms has gone. There's quite a number of things that have been, they were, to be perfectly honest, they were suggesting in the first place simply would not work either. So, yes, and also, in the days of austerity, yes, we've argued long and hard if there was an inflationary uplift, the budget should be circa 500 million. So the reality is we're working with a budget which is far less in value than what we had in 2014, which in all reality that's the sum that we are working with today.
Yeah, and as the saying goes, the Lord giveth with one hand and taketh away with the other. They have got this 40%, drop in BPS, which is that's a big chunk.
Yes, and a lot of businesses, I suggest, they might have held back if there was a 40%, just in order to give them a little bit of time to see, to get there, because it's a major change. It's a major change going from the BPS to the SFS. So in a generation, I suggest, and for that reason, people will be, taking soundings. They will be listening to advices, etc., and considering, if they can actually conform to what is required. But at this 40% cut, not many of them will be able to afford to take that sort of cut in the first year. And there's a feeling that they're being coerced into the scheme in the first year. And in order to sweeten the pill, it's as if they're putting a little bit more cheese on. There's an additional £1,000 available up to the first 100 hectares for joining the scheme in year one. So that's an additional sweetness to get people to come into it.
And are you confident that the Welsh Assembly government has looked across at the situation in England? Are they learning from the mistakes that we've made? I mean, you were saying about the tree planting, the hedgerow planting, the budget. You see what has happened with the sustainable farming incentive in England. It's just the rug has been pulled, closed to new applications, not enough budget there. Do you feel confident that things in Wales are going to be different? I mean, Hugh Davis has seen it from government he was a DEFRA minister in the last Labour government. He's now a minister overseeing a very similar portfolio.
Yeah. Well, obviously, he's extremely experienced as a minister, so he understands it. I said to you earlier, DEFRA did not undertake an impact assessment. They have in Welsh Government, so give them praise there as well. And it is a whole farm scheme. So, it encompasses everything that farm can deliver. And I fundamentally still feel that is the right approach, so that farms can actually come in, enter the universal layer, and optional actions going beyond what you have to deliver on the 12 universal actions. There's budget availability to step up, but that universal. I've got this analogy in my mind. Any ship will carry its ballast right at the bottom of its hull, and that's you don't carry the ballast of the top decks. And likewise, farming is the same. There's farming does underpin the whole industry, and for that reason, farmers being confident in able to produce and invest is crucial.
NFU President Aled Jones. So Hugh, you win some, you lose some in Wales.
Yeah, look, I think they're in a better position than they were. I mean, 2 years ago, I remember going to the Welsh show and there was this whole 10% tree planting thing, like some sort of Damocles hanging over the whole of Welsh agriculture, which clearly at the time was not a good place to be. And they felt very put out, and there had been no risk assessment done, and this had just been rolled out. They're in a better place than they were. But I think the big thing is, as in the audio, or for the Welsh farmers, is going to be their BPS cut next year, 40%. Anyone listening to this in England will be saying, well, welcome to the party, mate. This is the world without BPS. So you've got to be in it to win it, or don't bother. And that actually, it's not easy, particularly if you're, I don't know, an upland farm, or you're a, fairly small grassland farm. That she was very reliant on that BPS. It is, as we know in England, it is a huge cultural shock for some of these farm businesses to get used to, whether they're small or large, actually, because it's the big ones. It's just as harsh when there's suddenly not a couple £100,000 worth of BPS coming into the account and it's suddenly gone. So yeah, there are some big challenges there. But I think, as most of them say, whilst it's not perfect, it could have been a lot worse.
It could have been a lot worse. I mean, they've won the battle on tree planting, or at least the 10% tree planting rule.
Yeah, they have, and that was, a massive concern, and you can get why it was a massive concern, because it was a not particularly well thought out bit of policy, whether it's around trying to reduce carbon or just the practicalities of it, how it would impact tenants, how it would impact freeholders, and so on and so forth. It was a bit of a mess. And clearly it was going to have a huge impact, or would have had a huge impact on lots of farms. And actually, would it have achieved what they wanted it to achieve? And there's probably smarter ways of sequestering carbon and cutting emissions from farms than planting all these trees. There's a place for tree planting, absolutely, but having this carte blanche 10% was a bit bonkers, really, and particularly in some of the more upland areas where the trees might not do that well. I mean, some trees do okay in upland, other areas they don't. So yeah, it was a bit of a messy policy, but it seems that has gone. So that's a good thing.
And Aled Jones raising some concern, or voicing some concern, that the hedgerow planting option, it might be a little bit too, well, is there going to be budget there, or are they going to have the same problem that they had in England in terms of running out of money and things being a little bit too popular?
Yeah, if they're too generous, man, what do you do? I mean, they're stepping into a new thing. I think Abby Reid is quoted in the Farmers Weekly this week as saying it's like we're going to be sort of stepping over a bit of a cliff edge because they're not used to life without BPS. Equally, the ministers want to, or the civil servants want the support to go into the farming community because they work in the Department of Agriculture. So you've got to make it attractive. I suppose you just got to be ready to throttle it back or put thresholds in there, limits in there, if they all go mad and start planting millions of miles of hedges everywhere. In the same way, some of our guys went mad and started doing thousands of acres of wild bird, and the whole farm went into it, and boom, soon ran out of money and actually didn't really deliver much.
Deputy First Minister Hugh Davis, of course, being a former DEFRA minister himself, he's describing it as not just a whole farm approach, but a whole nation approach. He's saying that this is going to be good for the whole of Wales, not just for farmers.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure his boss might differ. I mean, the First Minister stood up the other day, didn't she, and said, given that you have 200 and something odd million quid spent on you and you don't deliver 0.5% to our Welsh GDP, she was questioning support for farmers. So perhaps she's not in the same place as the rural minister. But yeah, look, they're trying to make it all things to all men and make it the people's, this is a Labour administration in Wales trying to make it the people's farm or was it sustainable farm? It's not called SFI, sustainable farming scheme. They're trying to make it the people's scheme, and that's you'd expect them to do that, to sort of paint it in those universal ways. Go back to when Mark Drakeford was at the Welsh show. Again, that was a couple of years ago. I think it was before the Welsh show a couple of years ago. And Mark Drakeford, there was that line he said about, farm spending. How do I justify all this farm spending to a taxi driver in Cardiff, when they're struggling with their business, with their mortgage, with this, that and the other. It's I suppose they've got to make it mass appeal. The other big thing to remember with the Welsh scenario, isn't it, is there is a Senate election coming up in May. And that is going to be very interesting. Will the Labour heartlands of the south of Wales continue to return regardless what's happening elsewhere? Obviously, the Tories further north, Mid Wales and further north, had plenty of seats years ago, or in the last parliament they had some, and the previous parliament almost wiped out in Wales. You've got to wonder, is the space, will reform come into Wales? Will reform come in and upset? There's been so much stuff, whether it's 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. There's plenty of people in Wales that are a bit cross with their government. So it's going to be really interesting. So part of this as well is probably thinking, well, there's an election coming in May. That's less than a year away. Do we want to make ourselves vulnerable, really wind up the farmers, wind up the rest of Wales that isn't South Wales? There's a bit of careful manoeuvring going on there as well, because obviously with all that's happening, whether it's Plaid threatening, whether it's, I don't know whether we'll see a Conservative come back, but you'd certainly think there would be a certain element of reform. They're doing very well elsewhere in the country, in the UK. Why aren't they? They could well be in for doing some serious damage come that Welsh election. So they're trying to be all things to all men. That's why it's the people's scheme, Johann, not just the scheme of farmers, even though it's paid to farmers. But hey, it sounds better in their eyes.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're up before sunrise during the busiest time of year and still on your feet 12 hours later. The V12 Cotswold dealer boot is made for days like these, built for comfort, safety and strong enough to handle whatever the day throws at you. They've also been independently tested by Sartre against the market-leading boot, proving they're not only the toughest, but also outperforming the competition in long-lasting durability as well. No gimmicks, just boots that do their job so you can do yours. Now that's fair dinkum. The V12 Cotswold gets tougher with age.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm followed by your message to 88440. So Louise, what have you, any messages this week?
Oh, yes, I've had some messages and they all relate actually to the last week's episode. And in particular, they relate to the olive grove item that we did. People are really interested in this. They want to know how David Hoyles is going to get on, whether this is the new big thing, if you like. They're all fascinated, all interested. So I think we're going to have to get David back on the podcast before too long. He actually sent me a photograph this week to show that the olives are there. They're appearing. So, it's all looking good at the moment. So, yeah, we must go back there, I think, Johann, and do another item when he's getting close to harvest.
I think we absolutely must. It's not only a new crop, it's going to be a brand new product, the first English olive oil.
Yeah, we'll. I don't think we'll offer to go. The first harvest is all going to be done by hand, so we might not want to be too keen to get back there. But we could go. We could go and do a little bit of harvesting with him, couldn't we? And let everybody know what yields are like. I'm not quite sure how you measure olive yields, but there you go.
And the rest of the harvest, much feedback on that? Variable as ever?
Yeah, I mean, harvest is well and truly underway, I think, as we all know. So the combines are rolling and the results are coming in. I think the AHDB have issued their first results report this week. That's just on winter barley. And that's just from 4 sites. So some very affected by drought and some less so. And I guess that's going to be exactly the same with farms. I mean, there have been some really quite encouraging results, but there have also been some very disappointing ones. So as we said last week, this is going to be a mixed bag. I mean, it always is a bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? But I think this year in particular, nobody quite knows what they're going to see or get. But we have to just keep our fingers crossed and hope that everybody is more pleasantly surprised than they think they're going to be.
Some really variable yields out there, Hugh.
Yeah, there is, isn't there? I was talking to some just people locally here, into some barley crops, actually not that bad. Some of them were pretty rubbish straw-wise yield. Straw yield was a pretty rubbish, but the grain quality, as we sort of reflected on the other week when we were talking about it, is actually there and the tonnage is there. Some of the wheats, I mean, it's weird talking to one local grower and they're sort of cutting barley, wheat and oilseed rape all in the same sort of week when normally it comes, one after the other. But I think it's probably the same for lots of people, particularly in the drier parts of the country. So yeah, not a total, I get that some places it is a total write-off. And look, this drought, we're getting some rain this weekend, which thank the Lord for that. I hope we get some rain anyway, and it looks a bit unsettled into next week, just typical as the combine's trying to get going. The maize is on life support at the moment, certainly on our farm and elsewhere, other parts. So, but harvest-wise, yes, I would say, carrying on the theme of let's not write it off yet, because actually it might be okay.
And some special harvest news from Rutland, Hugh.
Yeah, we mentioned this the other year, actually. Leicestershire and Rutland Rural Policing Team. Now, go and look it up on the old Facebook because they've done. I just think it's one of the best posts I've seen from a policing team talking about harvest. It talks about obviously the usual things we expect about road safety and tractors moving around at all hours, the combines are out. But it's got a few lines in. So, people are working dawn to dusk, often well into the night. Harvest vehicles are slow, they're wide, and they don't move like cars. But they're feeding the nation and doing it under enormous pressure. The piece talks about how horrendous the last growing year has been. And the line I really like in this, and please do go and look it up. It's Leicestershire and Rutland Rural Policing Team's Facebook post from I think it was Thursday. It was put out. Farmers don't want praise, just space, time, and respect. Let them get the job done, and let's get them and you home safely. So it's a really long post, and it talks about a whole load of stuff around road safety, about the challenges that farmers are up against, and how really hard it is running farm businesses, etc., etc., etc. So well done again, Leicestershire and Rutland Rural Policing Team, for recognising and having a really insightful view of what's happening on the farms, and then pushing that out to the wider community, so people perhaps just, take time, give them some space and let them get the harvest done without trying to cut them off all the time on the road and phone up and whinge about combines working in fields at 1 a.m. when I'm trying to get my kids to sleep. Well, we farm love, so you don't have to.
People whinging at farmers, whatever next? How are the markets doing, Hugh?
Markets this week, finished steer dead weight is up 4.2p on the week, 638.2. It is jumping back up again. The live weight drops back slightly, 360.8. Sheep markets, SQQ on the dead weight, 730.6. That's dropped back just over 4p on the week. The live ring goes up 351.2. That's up nearly 10p on the week there. So some strong performance still continuing in those sheep rings. The pig price edges up 0.1 of a penny, 207.7 this week. If you are headed into the wonderful world of the arable markets, well, obviously, some of these yields or more abundant yields are obviously going to have some influence on pricing. Feed wheat's actually gone up just over £1 this week, £158.80p. Milling wheat's gone up £6 this week, £188.70 spot. Barley goes back 20p, £140.10p. Oilseed rape goes up a fiver, £395.60. Feed peas drop back £5, £205.30. Feed beans drop back £5, £210.30. And the oil's creeping up again, 71.94. So we're almost up 170 on the week if you are filling tractors and combines with diesel. So not good movement there.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
If you're heading to the Royal Welsh Show this summer, make sure you stop by the Case IH stand. See our latest machinery up close and have a chat with our expert team. We're here to help you keep your farm running smoothly when it matters most. Can't make it to the show? Just head over to caseih.com to explore our full range of machines online. And right now, you can take advantage of some great finance offers exclusively from CNH Capital. Business use only. Terms and conditions apply.
And finally, with the British Lions about to embark on their first test against the Wallabies, we thought we'd bring you a special interview. Retired rugby international and former British Lion Tom Youngs is, of course, a Norfolk farmer. Louise caught up with Tom at last month's cereals event and asked him about the similarities and the differences between rugby and farming.
So, Tom, after 17 years, I think, of Leicester Tigers and professional rugby, you're back to the home farm in Norfolk. You've just described farming as a proper love. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that, so rugby almost came second to me in when I was growing up. Like I went and played at the weekends and Sundays and at school and stuff like that. But my true love was always farming. I was constantly on the farm, wanting to be driving a tractor, wanting to be help do this. We had ewes in those days. We had a dairy herd as well. So I constantly wanted to be in the whole environment of it. So actually, then later as I got older, my teenage years, I actually like rugby was going pretty well. I then got picked up by Leicester. and I was about 15, 16, and then I pursued a career in that. But I'm very fortunate that I could go and do 17 years as a professional rugby player. And then when that was done, I had an opportunity to come back to the family farm, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And it's an absolute love for me to be back home doing it.
So what have you bought from your rugby career that you've been able to apply to the farming business?
It's a funny one, isn't it? I think generally you go away and you learn about life experiences. And I think when you come back to family, especially come back to it, and you're dealing with your father or your uncles, and you've got to handle a conversation in a very, very particular way. You hear of families falling out when they go back, and I went back as a 35-year-old man, like. Dad has to speak to me in a certain way, and I have to speak to Dad in a certain way. That's a neutral respect where you are. When you're 21, 22, you're probably still the boy, and you're probably also yourself. You handle the conversation a lot worse than you should do. So I learned a lot about how to handle people in some regard. Manage staff is probably, I was captain for 6 years at Tigers. I think managing a group of players and stuff like that. And then also getting a clear direction on what we want to do and sticking to the plan. I always call it the muddy path. There's a muddy path, and you want to stay on it. The mud will always pull you in. It doesn't matter how diligent you are, as long as you can get back onto the path out the mud and carry on, keep trying to achieve the goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Sticking to the plan, what's happened in farming in the last 6 to 8 months, something like that.
The plan has changed a bit, yeah.
Plan has changed a bit. But you were describing in the talk you just gave, you're actually expanding the farm, I think. You are investing in it.
We've invested into some machinery. I think, like anything, you can't judge it all on 1 year. Like you have to, as I say, the muddy path. The government has pulled us off that path a little bit. We've got to get back on. We've got to make some adjustments of maybe handing land over and shares and maybe earlier than my father or uncle wanted to do. But that's where we're at. We're going to get that done. But we're still on the same path of where we want to get to. We expanded. We took 700 acres. We're farming just under 2,000 acres. We took 700 acres on 3 years ago. We're looking to expand that. I think there's opportunity going to come. If it's the right opportunity, I think that's where you've got to be key. It's not just taking land on for the sake of taking land on. It has to be the right opportunity, the right people to go forward and hopefully take on some more opportunity in the landway.
Yeah, so tell us a bit about the farm.
So we're farming 2,000 acres. That range from 1,100 acres of cereal, that's wheat, winter malting barley and spring malting barley as well. Then we grow about 380 acres of sugar beet. Obviously, that's up in the air a little bit of what the price is going to be next year. We do tend to have good beet yield, so we're probably going to stick with it. We always have good, great crop. We also grow vining peas. We've got about 68 hectares of vining peas in at the moment. I think we used to grow potatoes. We came out of it sort of early 2000, and then we rent that out to the next door neighbour, and they have the water off us. We've got 3 boreholes around the farm, so they have the water off us. We then also have recently, in the last sort of 3 years, we've rented some pig land out on, and so we've got about. It was 70 acres the last 2 years, gone up to 100 just the way the rotation works of the land. So there are 100 acres of North Farm livestock outdoor reared pigs who supply, I think, 99% of Waitrose outdoor pigs. So they're big players, and so we brought that into the equation now, yeah. And we've also hugely hit the diversification, the buzzword, which is in farming. But so I farm my cousin George, so he looks after mainly the diversifications, and we've gone from a 26 livery yard. We've got 26 self-storage containers, looking to expand that. We've also got cattle buildings we've turned into workshops, so people rent that off us. We've also converted a barn into a holiday let with a lake by it. So we've got a few things we're trying to sweat 100% of our assets, and it's amazing. You've got to drive around your farm with an open mind. Yes, you've known it at the back of your hand, but you've got to see opportunity in other things, not just growing crops.
And you're quite active on social media, I believe.
Yeah, I've just started, really. It's a funny one. I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I'm not really that kind of character. I think probably what really drove me to it was the just a disheartened farming, really. And I wanted to try and connect the public, because I have a following which are at rugby, obviously, and some of them won't have a clue about farming. Now, I think actually Clarkson's done a great job in bringing open the door to farming to the general public. Okay, so I just wanted to do that, and my videos are. They're fairly upbeat, a little bit juvenile, a little bit funny, but also there's some seriousness to it in times when I am hacked off with the weather and it's really tough and stuff like that. But that's farming. But just showcasing actually how tough an industry it is. Now, I'm not one to moan about farming or we are lucky what we do. It would be nice to just make a fraction bit more profit out of it. So, because it's a big business, farming. It's not just actually growing crops. There's dealerships on there. There's seed merchants on there. There's spray companies on there. Everyone's in it all together. Yeah, Farmers Week. There's magazines and everything all to do with it. And we all need actually the farmer to do well out of things, so then everyone else gets it. And at the moment, it's in a tough way, but I'm determined. The old saying, you know, the wheel always turns for the better. You just got to hold on very tight in the moment. It's a very challenging world, and I've never been have so much anxiety over budgets. At the moment, every day there's a budget, you worry about the farming. Yeah, and we're all the same about that, and it's really hard. But I try and put farming in a good way of what I love about farming, the family you're involved in it, everything like that, and showcase that to people. And generally, people seem to enjoy it, so it's quite nice.
And so what does the future hold then?
Future holds, well, I think at the moment there could be opportunity come our way. The biggest thing for me is, for example, I think you need a good bank manager on your hands right now to strike, because farming is not in a great way, and maybe bank managers are not looking great, but that's when you can really expand a business, but you need the backing of good people around you. So, like, we're very open and honest with our bank manager, and he's in a lot of budgets and he speaks to us about it all, and so we can have that opportunity. So there's an opportunity to strike on in 2 weeks' time. We want to be able to strike on that opportunity. I see us growing the business in land-wise. We're not really in a position to buy at the moment. We've spent a lot of money on diversification. Hopefully that will start bringing money in to be able to do that. But contract farming agreements, I think, is something I will definitely look at to make it a bit more efficiency. What worries me is labour, as in labour on the farm worries me. We've got a bloke called Tony, unbelievable guy. He's worked there for 25 years, brilliant. But he's into the latter part of his career, and he's rightfully wants to have a bit less hours, which is fine. But what does it look like? How do I run this farm efficiency with good labour or less labour? I've got to look at all those sort of things, really.
Yeah.
So,
and have you gone down the environmental
yeah, we have. We've done a fair bit. Cut bits out of cover crops massively now. Cut bits out of corners out of make it more efficient, make the farm more efficient, and helping with nature as well. So yeah, I'm big on that, really. I think we've done that. We've got into the schemes. We're very fortunate. What's happened just recently, they pulled we'll see what these schemes look like out in the years to come, really. But yeah, and I think we're in them at the moment, which is great, and we'll see what we're going to do later on.
A few quick fire rugby moments.
Yeah.
Best teammate.
Best teammate probably would have to be, I played with Dan Cole. He's now just retiring at the weekend. I went all the way through the academy with him, so he's probably one of my best mates. Obviously, I played with my brother, so I have to say him as well. But Dan Cole, for me, we went from the age of 16 all the way through the academy and played together all the way through, which is nice.
Toughest opponent?
Cool. I said in there, I said, people ask that a lot, and actually, there's some real tough people I've played against, but actually the ones who scare me the most are the ones who can embarrass you very quickly in front of a crowd, who can step you in a phone box, basically. So when you should trottle up and a kick chase and the winger catches it, you know he's a very jinky person, they run straight at you, you're like, oh, I hope I don't miss this tackle. Oh, I hope he doesn't step me and I land on my arse. So there we go. Yeah.
Favourite stadium?
I love Twickenham or Welford Road, but Principality in Cardiff, unbelievable. Roof closed. What an atmosphere. Great and fantastic place to play. I lost there quite heavily once and lost the Six Nations title, so that was a tough one, but it's a hell of a stadium.
Favourite rugby memory?
So I'd say 2013 Lions tour when we won it, and I went out with my brother, and there was about 7 Leicester lads on there. Some of us, like Coley was on there, Crofty, people I've been through the academy with. So that was a special moment. So that's probably my biggest moment, really. Yeah.
And your prediction for the Lions?
I think it'll be a lot tighter than we realised, but I do think the Lions will win 2-1.
So, Louise, Tom Young's fantastic interview. Not every day we get a British Lion or a former British Lion on the Farmers Weekly podcast.
No, not every day. And as you say, Johann, it was a really good chat we had with Tom. I mean, wasn't it great how upbeat and positive he is about farming, which, in the current circumstances, it was really good to hear that. He does recognise, Tom, that he's very fortunate to have another career to just move seamlessly to. And he genuinely loves farming, and he's really, really enjoying himself on the farm. So I hope he also enjoys watching the first test this weekend to see how the Lions get on. But his farming, as he said, it's his proper love.
There's no doubt he misses the rugby, but there are a lot of lessons that he's brought from rugby, as he said in the audio, and that apply to farming as well. I mean, we know that there are strong links between rugby and farming, just generally in the number of farmers who play rugby and the number of top rugby players who have been farmers. But there are, well, as Tom said, there are lots of similarities, or at least lessons to be learned from the sport into the sector.
Yes, there are lots of lessons, and he did talk about some of them, didn't he? Tom has the advantage that he did actually captain the Leicester Tigers side for, I think it was 6 years. So he has obviously got some leadership about him. He has a way of having conversations with people that might otherwise be quite difficult conversations. He also, and a lot of people really enjoyed this when he gave his talk, he uses this muddy path analogy. So he's saying, you need to have a plan. You need to know what direction that you're going to go in. He says you will get pulled off that path by the mud, and that's where his muddy path comes in. But he says you've actually just got to get back on it and keep going. And that he applied to rugby and to the farm, and I thought that was a really good one, actually.
And he's got some interesting priorities for the farm as well.
Yes, he has. Yes. I mean, he's got, I think, probably about 4 of those. The first one is that all of the farm assets have to be put to the best use. So they are really, pushing on and driving forwards with this farm. So he gave a really good example of that they have a livery yard on the farm. Now, that used to be run by somebody else, but was just located on their farm. And now they've taken that back in hand and are running it themselves. So that's he's working all those farm assets very hard. He is also looking very hard at cost control, and that'll be just the same as every farmer out there at the moment. He said, they've never been so anxious about budgets. He's looking again at labour and what he does about labour. He said he's got one man who's, I think, 70 years old, so probably won't want to be working full time for too much longer. So he's working out how he can replace him and if there's an innovative way of doing that. And then the final thing is expansion. They really want to increase the area that they're farming. And he says they're not in a position at the moment to buy more land, but they could certainly take on contract farm or something like that. So, very focused and knows what he wants to achieve.
I think he's probably, not so much on the quiet, but got a 5th priority as well. He seems to be carving a little bit of a niche for himself as a social media influencer, certainly looking at his Instagram feed, which I think is really, really insightful into, life on the farm, but also the farm business as well. So I wish him all the best with that, Louise. I think it could go well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been, he's had a few harvest hiccups, I think, in the last week. But he did actually make the point to us, didn't he, that he has a very good following on social media from his rugby career. And he said, look, if I can do anything to sort of improve the understanding of farming and what we are going through on a daily basis, then, he feels duty bound to do that and get that message across to that big following that he has. So good for him for doing that.
Yeah, well done, Tom Youngs, for that. And good luck to the British Lions as they go into the first test. And that's about it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Do remember to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back again next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories in UK agriculture. But for now, I'm Johann. Thank you for listening.